When a person disappears, it's a shocking event. It immediately captures our attention because it's so hard to imagine how an otherwise normal person can vanish and become a missing person. We immediately seek out answers to questions that can shed some light. Was there a history of depression? When and where was the victim last seen? Was a vehicle found, and if so, in what condition? Did the missing person have any obvious enemies? The answers to questions like these can many times provide an obvious direction for investigators to focus their attention, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes the answer is ambiguous, and rather than clearing the waters, adds mystery of its own. Was there a history of depression? Well, kinda, depending on who you ask. Did the missing person have any enemies? Yes, several. Some of the answers would support a suicide theory. Others seem to indicate a possible murder. We attempt to trace the last known movements of the missing person and discover that it's harder than it seems. In all but the smallest towns, it is possible for a person to get lost if getting lost is on the agenda. Think about a recent day of your own, when you had 10 things to do and errands to run. Did you tell someone each stop you intended to make? Did you drive your normal route? Did you, perhaps, go to a different store than the one you would normally visit? If a person were to disappear before they got home from the store, the answer to each of those questions would have a dramatic impact on how likely it is they could be found. That is, of course, assuming the missing person is dead. What if the missing person is not dead, but disappeared voluntarily? You would expect to find the missing person's vehicle, but in what condition? A burnt-out hulk left in the woods? Or abandoned near a bridge? What about their bank accounts? Their phone? The riddles multiply exponentially, like a virus that threatens to kill the investigation by overwhelming it with questions. And investigators have no choice but to fight back with an answer for each one. The scope of the investigation grows and more detectives are needed. In the shadow of unanswered questions piled atop one another, we begin to understand why missing persons cases are so fascinating, why they captivate us the way they do, pleading with us to solve them, and why after nearly 20 years, we are still asking the question, what happened to Ray Gricar? It's extremely common when a person goes missing to discover that the person engaged in a lifestyle considered high risk. Many times missing persons are engaged in sex work or drug use. Sometimes they suffer from untreated mental illness or dementia. Perhaps the reason that Ray Gricar's disappearance strikes us as so mysterious is that he was none of those things. Ray Gricar was a native son of Ohio and a die-hard Cleveland baseball fan. By most accounts, Ray had a privileged upbringing in Cleveland's Collinwood neighborhood and attended the prestigious Gilmore Academy Catholic School. After graduation, he went to the University of Dayton and developed two great passions: a love of the law, which he learned as an intern working in a prosecutor's office, and a romance with Barbara Gray. Upon graduation, Ray and Barbara moved back to Cleveland and married in 1969. He enrolled at Cape Western and got his Doctor of Law degree, and in 1978, he and Barbara adopted a baby girl, Laura. Ray was reportedly brilliant, a hard worker, and soon took a job as a prosecutor for Cuyahoga County. To all outside observers, Ray's life was the picture of personal and professional bliss. In 1980, Barbara was offered a job at Penn State, and the couple moved to State College, Pennsylvania. Their adopted daughter was still a toddler, and Ray intended to stay home and play Mr. Mom in their new town. But the district attorney offered Ray an assistant position and he accepted. He served admirably for several years, and through a series of staff changes and retirements, Ray found himself ideally positioned to run for district attorney of Center County. In 1985, he ran, and won, by a margin of 600 votes. By 1991, Ray and Barbara divorced. It was an amicable parting with no notable incidents of violence or scandal. He then remarried for a time, then divorced again, all the while serving as the district attorney for Center County, an office he would be re-elected to 4 times. Early in the new millennium, Ray found love again with an employee in the DA's office, Patty Fornicola. Ray moved in with Patty in her home in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, and they lived there together without incident until 2005. By all outward appearances, everything about Ray Gricar's life seemed normal. Even Ray himself was a picture of ordinary. He was a thin man with a receding hairline. Some might even say he looked a little like the actor James Woods. He was described as a private person, but willing to smile and perfectly pleasant to most. On Friday, April 15th, 2005, Ray Gricar should have been at work, but nobody found it surprising when he decided to take a half day. According to author Jen Baxter, Ray had been working hard for years, and lately it appeared to be catching up to him. He had started taking naps after work and had complained of feeling exhausted. That morning, he reconsidered the half day and called his office to say he wouldn't be in at all. There was plenty to do, but Ray led the kind of independent work life that professionals enjoy, able to take a day away and hit the links, or occupy his time in another way to recharge. In Ray's free time, he often enjoyed long drives and road trips to unwind. At about 11:30, Ray called Patty at the office. He said he was driving on Pennsylvania Route 192, a narrow two-lane highway that winds through rolling farmland and a state forest between Center Hall and Lewisburg. It was an uncommonly warm spring day, and the sun was shining. Ray mentioned that he wouldn't be home in time to take care of their dog, Honey, so Patty agreed to go right home after work to handle it. While Ray was out there somewhere, with the moonroof open on a Pennsylvania highway, a reporter from the Center Daily Times was trying to reach him for a comment. A 16-year-old offender that Ray had previously charged as an adult was seeking to have his case transferred to juvenile court. The newspaper wanted to get a comment from Ray about the juvenile offender's case by the end of the day, but Ray could not be found. In the end, the copy they sent off to the press for the Saturday morning edition of the Daily Times simply read, "Gricar could not be reached for comment Friday afternoon." By 11:30 p.m. on Friday, Ray had still not yet arrived home, and Patty was beginning to grow worried. Although Ray could be something of a free spirit, she did not think he would be out of touch for so long. Ray would have at least checked in. So with that in mind, Patty called 911 and reported Ray Gricar missing. According to Jen Baxter's excellent piece on Medium, the authorities took Ray's disappearance seriously from the start. However, Ray's tendency to indulge whims fostered some hesitancy on the part of investigators. Steve Sloan, a friend and colleague, mentioned that Ray had once hopped in the car and drove to Cleveland on the spur of the moment to catch a baseball game without telling anyone. According to the Center Daily Times, when Gricar returned, Sloan said he didn't understand why everyone was upset. He said he just felt like going for a ride. He didn't really see what the big deal was. When investigators checked the MLB schedule, they saw Cleveland had a home game that night. You can maybe understand why they thought, maybe he just took a night off for a baseball game again. Through the night they waited for Ray to show up, hoping he would walk through the door at 2 a.m., or 3:30, or maybe by dawn, but he never did. At breakfast, police had mobilized a comprehensive search. According to a report, the state police used a helicopter to search for 2 hours along the banks of the Susquehanna River, near where his car was found, for any signs of Gricar. Investigators also used a bloodhound to try to pick up his scent, to no avail. Specifically, searchers were looking for Ray's distinctive car, a bright red Cooper Mini with a white top. If it was still near Route 192, it shouldn't have been hard to spot. The authorities reportedly even asked stadium security in Cleveland to look through their parking lot to see if Ray's little red Mini was there. But it wasn't in Cleveland. At 6:30 p.m. on Saturday, searchers found Ray's car in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, the eastern terminus of Route 192. Ray himself was nowhere to be found. On Sunday, April 17th, the news broke in the papers. The Center County DA had been reported missing. That was a big deal. According to the Carlisle Sentinel, police on Saturday found the car of Center County's top prosecutor, but no sign of the missing man, who failed to return home from a drive the day before, authorities said. Bellefonte Police Chief Dwayne Dixon said state police found the red and white Mini Cooper belonging to District Attorney Ray F. Gricar, 59, of Bellefonte, at about 6:30 p.m. in a dirt parking lot on the outskirts of Lewisburg in Union County. The parking lot was at North Water Street and St. John Street, at a place called the Street of Shops, an assemblage of antique and craft and thrift shops where local collectors and artisans rolled their wares in and out. You've likely seen the kind of place we're talking about. In a small town where industrial interests have moved on to bigger, more connected places, taking the young labor force with them, and the factories and warehouses and storefronts left behind fall vacant and hollow. Someone has an idea to bring some life back into this town, this block, this building, and soon a place like Street of Shops springs up. You can take a beautiful drive in the countryside, then stop and shop at a kitschy little joint that ain't too bad, as long as you don't look too much deeper than the most recent coat of paint or the boarded up storefront 3 doors down. So with that being said, Ray's car was found in the parking lot just across from the Street of Shops. According to the article, Police Chief Dixon said there were no signs of foul play, but state police in Milton were processing the car for evidence. Within a day, Ray's disappearance was not only news in Pennsylvania, but in his native Ohio too. Everyone was urged to watch out for any sign of Ray Gricar, who was reportedly last seen wearing a blue fleece-type jacket, jeans, and sneakers. At that early point in the press coverage, we did not know exactly what the police had found in the car, but we know now, and the details are simultaneously thought-provoking and frustrating. The car was neatly parked, nothing out of the ordinary, no sign of a struggle. It was locked. Ray's phone was inside of the car, but turned off. However, Ray's keys, wallet, and laptop were missing. In the early hours of the search, everyone held out hope for the best. Sure, Ray's car had been found, but there was no sign of anything else out of the ordinary. Ray could feasibly still be out there. Lawyer LaDon Young stated, "I'm just hoping that he comes back here and is mad at hell at all of us for making such a fuss." As time passed, many began to fear the worst, but if there was anything that left a glimmer of hope, it was Ray's missing computer. Some dared to hope that the reason they had not found it was because Ray was still out there somewhere. In a piece that described Ray as organized and anticipating retirement, Ray's girlfriend, Patty Fornicola, wondered about the computer. Fornicola said she's puzzled that Gricar's laptop computer can't be found. She called him neat and meticulous, the type of person who would never leave a mess on his desk. When asked if Gricar would ever misplace the computer, Fornicola laughed and said, No, I don't think so." As Independence Day 2005 approached, a psychic profiler even weighed in on the case. Carla Barron described a scenario in which Ray Gricar was killed by a criminal network that he had stumbled upon in his work. Barron claimed that Ray was under surveillance by criminals who abducted him as he parked at the Street of Shops, and that Ray went with them willingly to protect his family and was later murdered. By the end of that month, though, all hope to find Ray alive seemed to have disappeared. On July 30th, 2 fishermen found Ray's laptop in the Susquehanna River, and it was missing its hard drive. Police believed that it had been thrown from the State Route 45 bridge. Months later, in October, the missing hard drive was found about a football field's distance from the spot where the laptop had been found. Investigators went to great lengths to recover data from the drive, but were unsuccessful. This leads us to a rather interesting question. Why destroy the laptop and hard drive? Was something on either of them that was incriminating? Police would examine Ray's business dealings extensively. They even went through a list of his convictions, his financial matters, his insurance policies. There was no hint that Ray was involved in anything illegal, or that he would have been attempting to conceal anything improper by destroying his computer or hard drive. Although a clue or a new tidbit of information would show up from time to time, nothing ever seemed to bring police any closer to answers. A handful of years later, in 2011, Ray's grown daughter, Laura, petitioned to have him declared dead and the court obliged. In the eyes of the law, Ray Gricar was legally dead. There are those who are certain that Ray Gricar committed suicide, and some of those people insist the circumstances and evidence support their conclusion. There were no signs of any struggle near Ray's car. The car was in working condition. There was no mechanical issue, no breakdown that would have forced Ray to seek help from someone he didn't know, not even a flat tire. Ray left his phone in the car, like he knew he wasn't going to be needing it anymore. And it wasn't just the condition in which the car was found that led some to believe that Ray had killed himself. A report in the local paper shone a spotlight on a unique feature of the location where Ray's car was found. A rusted railroad trestle, long ago abandoned, crosses the river nearby. No tracks lead to the trestle anymore, and a weathered pile of branches and other debris block the bridge's entrance. On a grassy stretch where a railroad bed once lay, a small bundle of yellow flowers sat conspicuously on a juice container. Some couldn't help but note, Ray's disappearance had some similarities to a suicide that struck very close to home for Ray Gricar. According to the Lancaster New Era, Gricar's brother, Roy J. Gricar, vanished under similar circumstances in Ohio on May 8, 1996, and was later ruled to have killed himself. The 53-year-old Westchester, Ohio resident told his wife he was going out to buy some mulch and never returned. His car was found 2 days later abandoned at a Dayton park near a river and a bridge. Weeks later, investigators pulled his body from the water. His death was ruled a suicide by drowning. Sadly, you heard that right. 9 years earlier, Ray's brother Roy killed himself when he jumped off a bridge into the Great Miami River. If you take a look on Google Earth at the location where Ray's car was found, you can see the former railbed, tracks removed, which leads to the abandoned bridge near the Street of Shops. There's a quaint park with a picnic area and a short wooded path to the bridge. It's not hard at all to imagine a person who is depressed and intent on ending it all choosing this as their spot. Ray was known as a poor swimmer, and a leap from a bridge into the river, swollen and flowing swiftly with spring runoff, would surely have been deadly. This raises some serious questions though, and they have to be addressed. Did Ray suffer from depression? It's a tricky question because the people who knew Ray would tell you he didn't. Not that anyone would know anyway. He had never been diagnosed clinically. But then there were the reports that Ray had been feeling tired and sleeping a lot, which can be a big symptom of depression. The Citizen's Voice reported, statements from his girlfriend, a clerk in his office, are raising questions about the prosecutor's physical and mental health. His girlfriend, Patricia Fornicola, had encouraged Gricar to seek a medical examination for any possible medical or mental conditions that may need attention. For 3 weeks he had been complaining of fatigue. Friends and family point out that Ray had announced his retirement months earlier and was reportedly looking forward to it. Some say that's a sign that Ray may not have killed himself. Others say it's possible Ray was already planning his own death and was simply giving his county and his colleagues time to get a successive administration ready for the day that he would be gone. And it's easy to forget that depression is not always behind every suicide. Unfortunately, people kill themselves for any number of reasons. Money trouble, romantic trouble, criminal wrongdoing. Investigators, however, found no sign of any of that in Ray's life. But knowing that his brother killed himself in an apparent spur-of-the-moment suicide, and that depression can run in families, does make us question whether there was a family predisposition to depression that the Gricar brothers had become adept at concealing. In 2009, investigators revealed someone had used the desktop computer in Ray's home to search for how to wreck a hard drive, how to fry a hard drive, and water damage to a notebook computer. The Daily Times wrote, Tuesday, a day before the 4th anniversary of Gricar's disappearance, Bellefonte police detective Matthew Rickard released the information, raising the question of why Gricar would have wanted to destroy that hard drive. Family spokesman Tony Gricar said it seems to dismiss the theory that Gricar was a victim of foul play. To me, it looks like it absolutely knocks out the theory of foul play. But he's quick to add that this is just one fact in a complex mystery. Later, Tony Gricar would continue to advocate for the possibility that his uncle could still be alive, so obviously he was not totally convinced. In the end, though, it's all just speculation because we don't know. If Ray was looking forward to retirement and didn't suffer from depression or kill himself, what else could be the explanation? There were lots of cases over Ray Gricar's career as a prosecutor that involved some very bad people, and it has made many question whether Ray could have been murdered by someone seeking revenge. In 1996, Ray prosecuted a woman who opened fire and killed someone on the Penn State campus. It was a high-profile case that occupied the local press for a time, but nobody could explain how a case like that could lead to a murder of a DA. In another case, Ray prosecuted a man in the Witness Protection Program, and some wondered whether Ray was murdered by a criminal who was bad enough to need witness protection. Investigators, however, found these theories rather far-fetched. There are thousands of prosecutors who try criminal cases every week, murders and rapes and kidnappings and beatings and stabbings. Very, very, very few of those prosecutors ever meet their violent end as a result of a revenge plot. We see it in the movies a whole lot more than it actually happens in real life. Some would argue, however, that the higher profile the case, the higher the stakes, and the more likely a murder becomes. Make no mistake, Ray Gricar handled one very high-profile case.
On a huge Saturday for college football, shocking allegations of sexual child abuse against a former coach for the revered Penn State Nittany Lions, and a pair of university bigwigs are accused of covering it all up.
As the DA for Center County, Ray Gricar had the duty of prosecuting cases in his jurisdiction, and in 1998, allegations were made against a very prominent name at Penn State, Jerry Sandusky. You might be having a bad attack of cognitive dissonance right now, or questioning your own sanity. 1998? Didn't the Jerry Sandusky thing happen in 2011? Yes, it did, and that's what makes this very intriguing. In 1998, when a boy made allegations of sexual abuse against Penn State's defensive coordinator, Ray Gricar was in charge of investigating the case and chose not to prosecute. That's not to say that Ray didn't investigate the case thoroughly. He did. According to one report, he tried to get information by having officers hide in the home of one of the victims as the mother confronted Sandusky. For reasons we don't know, Ray Gricar did not feel he could prove his case against Jerry Sandusky and chose not to prosecute him. Some will say it was the Old Boys Network, once again protecting a local sports hero. Regardless, the consequences were that Sandusky remained free to molest boys for another 13 years, until the 2011 charges we all remember. Did one of Sandusky's victims take revenge on Ray Gricar for his perceived dereliction of duty? It's an intriguing proposition, but again, investigators find it implausible. Here is Bellefonte Police Chief Sean Weaver.
Just a couple years ago, a farmer outside of Lewisburg called police, saying he saw two cars and heard gunshots.
One had Ray in it, and then he said that he heard gunshots. When he took us out to where he said he heard the gunshots, he was trying to guesstimate as to how far away these gunshots were. So we, and it ended up that the guy was very, his credibility was an issue. And he tried to tie it all into the Sandusky and into the government, and there was conspiracy theories, and it was basically a waste of a day.
Investigators have never uncovered any evidence that Ray was murdered, much less that it was connected to the Jerry Sandusky decision. In 2005, just before Ray disappeared, his name appeared in the papers once again. The AP reported, in a story under the headline, "Deputy Cleared of Rape Accusation." Charges have been dropped against a Philadelphia sheriff's deputy accused of raping an unconscious woman in State College. The bottom line is this: only the deputy and the woman know what happened between them on the date in question, Center County District Attorney Ray Gricar said. I would not feel confident and comfortable going forward to a jury with any allegation against either party arising out of this event because of their credibility problems. Gricar said he decided to drop charges against the 43-year-old after police investigated some of the things that the defense said at a preliminary hearing. I believe that would make it impossible to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was unconscious as she claimed when the sexual episode occurred, Gricar said. We have no choice but to drop such a case. The woman who reported the rape in that case later gave birth to the sheriff deputy's child, confirmed by a paternity test. Ray had refused to prosecute the deputy because the woman could not prove that she had been raped. In my opinion, that's definitely enough to piss somebody off. Maybe you're starting to pick up on it, but for as kind of a person as people said he was, when it came to the law, his reputation was much less stellar. A dad or a husband or brother or boyfriend has been known to take deadly action on occasion in our society. In defense of her honor is usually how it's explained. Maybe it's a bridge too far to suspect Ray's disappearance could have been a revenge murder by someone, or on behalf of someone he supposedly wronged in the course of his job, but maybe it isn't. If the question is, did Ray have enemies with motive to want him gone, the answer is obviously yes, many times over. Nobody can work as a DA for 20 years and not make some enemies. In December of 2005, Pennsylvania State Representative Mark Cohen sent a letter to the Department of Justice requesting a fresh, complete, and independent investigation to determine whether Gricar's disappearance could be linked to the death of Assistant DA Jonathan Luna, who was found dead in a creek in 2003. He had been stabbed 36 times. There were real concerns that perhaps, in some way nobody had noticed, Luna and Gricar's work had overlapped, and the murderer of Luna may have been responsible for Ray's disappearance as well. For the record, Jonathan Luna's murder is still unsolved, but no connection to Ray's disappearance was ever found. On the other hand, Ray's own colleagues seem to find allegations of revenge killings a little far-fetched. District Judge Bradley Lunsford, a longtime colleague, and several others who knew Ray closely, said there had never been any legitimate threats against Ray that they were aware of. From one report, a local defense attorney, Jim Bryant, called Gricar a low-profile prosecutor who does not make enemies. I think you absolutely can rule out foul play. He said that Gricar leaves a trail pretty much wherever he goes. He is as predictable as the sunrise. Of course, work-related entanglements weren't the only possible reason someone could have murdered Ray Gricar. It simply could have been a stranger, a wrong time, wrong place kind of thing. And then there were some facts that made people wonder. According to the Wilkes-Barre Times Leader, police found trace amounts of cigarette ash in the car. Ray was a non-smoker and did not like the smell of smoke. 2 cigarette butts were found outside the car and were tested for DNA, but neither matched Ray or anyone else in the database. Could Ray have been murdered by a cigarette-smoking stranger who saw an affluent man in a flashy car? Law enforcement concluded that there were only rumors and innuendo and unsourced allegations. They found no hard evidence that Ray was murdered, in a revenge plot or otherwise. If Ray didn't kill himself and he wasn't murdered, is it possible he left on his own to start a new life somewhere? According to police, the bloodhounds that attempted to track Ray got confused in the parking lot, leading them to believe that Ray could have left the scene in a second vehicle. As usual, there are the typical objections from friends and family. He would never just run out on his family like that. He was looking forward to long road trips with Patty. Nevertheless, if Ray was still alive, we could expect that there might be some sightings of him. Surprisingly, there have been a lot of reports from people who claimed to have seen him. In June of 2005, a man reported that he and his daughter had seen Ray with an older woman at a Southfield, Michigan restaurant on May 27th. The authorities pursued the lead vigorously, developing a sketch of the woman, who was in her 70s, and told the press they considered it to be their most credible lead. In the end, nothing came of it. In another sighting, a woman reported seeing Ray at a Meijer grocery store in Ohio on June 7th. Ray's nephews, Tony and Chris, drove to the store and watched the surveillance tape. They came away convinced that the man the shopper had seen was not their Uncle Ray. In August of 2005, a woman snapped some pictures of a man eating at a Chili's restaurant in Texas, and some said he looked like Ray. It took the FBI 6 weeks to identify the man, and it turned out it was not Ray Gricar. One sighting even had investigators reviewing recordings of the Oprah Winfrey Show because someone thought that they saw Ray in the audience. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue came in 2011 when a man picked up by police in Utah for a minor trespassing violation refused to give the police his name. Someone noticed the man's uncanny resemblance to Ray Gricar, and for a day, the crime blotter was ablaze with speculation. The man matched Ray Gricar's height and weight and appeared to be his approximate age. I've seen the photos and I agree, the man looks a lot like Ray Gricar. It took some time, but police eventually learned that the man was a New Mexico native, Philip Todd Beavers. He wasn't Ray Gricar, he just had not felt like giving his name to the police, so another strikeout. Ray Gricar was reportedly also seen watching a baseball game at a bar in Wilkes-Barre. Some wondered whether Ray had taken off to Europe and started a new life in Slovenia, where he had some family ties. None of the sightings of Ray Gricar have ever turned out to be him, but some can't help but wonder if he is actually out there. Where some could see Ray leaving his phone behind as a sign that he committed suicide because he wouldn't be needing it again, others insist that he left it behind turned off because he knew his phone could be otherwise traced, even when not in use, and he needed time to get away before his disappearance was discovered. Some point to the searches on Ray Gricar's desktop computer for how to fry a hard drive as evidence that he was planning a suicide, which he later carried out. I would propose perhaps it's possible that Ray, without thinking, made travel plans on his laptop, and then realized they would track him down if he did not destroy the laptop and hard drive, which he then did. That could be what happened. Or Ray could have been murdered by a recently paroled offender or a wronged assault victim or a drug lord that he prosecuted. That could be what happened. Or perhaps he strolled to the picnic area between the bridges near Street of Shops, picked a few flowers, finished his juice, put the flowers in the bottle, and left them on the path. With a glance over his shoulder to confirm nobody was watching, Ray slipped into the wooded path and climbed into the railroad's rusting relic. A moment later, he jumped into the river from his wobbly perch, never to be seen again. The official position of law enforcement is that Ray killed himself. That could also be what happened. If so, maybe he left a hint behind. When investigators examined his office after his disappearance in 2005, they found that Ray had left the county code book on his desk, open to the page that contains guidelines for filling a vacancy in the DA's office. That's where we're at now. We just don't know. Until Ray shows up, dead or alive, the mystery of what happened to Ray Gricar will remain unresolved.